he's, you know, the Spirit rises up in you as you seek the divine, as you know. It rises up in you with answers. And most of them are so full of love.
They dubbed her the Outlaw Queen, the lady who rode beside legends, sung with fire in her throat, and wore her scars like jewels. They never inquired, however, how many times she had to swallow her own voice in order to stay on stage. For more than 5 decades, Jessi Colter was more than just a name in country music. She was a shadow, a wife, a muse, and a miracle that men claimed but few appreciated. They used her voice to sell records and her stillness to create empires. For years she allowed them. But now Jessi is speaking, not to seek vengeance, not to be ashamed. But finally, who took her brightness and dared to call it love? This is not gossip. This is memory. The truth never made it into the album notes. It's the truth she hid behind stage lights, smoky pubs, and fake grins. 5 names, 5 males. Each has a chapter on her pain. One person told her that there was only room for 1 star in a marriage. One convinced her that love was supposed to pain. One looked her in the eyes, took her lines, and expressed gratitude for the inspiration. One offered her freedom in the studio, but then deleted her voice note by note. And one, this one hurt the most, stood on the same stage, donned the same glitter, grinned in pictures. She closed the door when Jessi needed her the most. Stay with us for a moment, because the first name will be announced. And after you hear it, you'll never look at country music in the same way. Before she was Jessi Colter, the outlaw legend, she was just Miriam Johnson, a small-town girl with a church piano under her fingers and a wildfire of songs tucked into her diary. When she met Duane Eddy, he was already a household celebrity in music, known as the King of Twang, with a visage fit for record covers and a guitar tone capable of filling stadiums. He promised her the world, and at 19, she believed him. But Jessi did not marry a man. She married an empire. Within that kingdom, there was no space for 2 voices, only 1 spotlight, and it was not hers. Initially, it felt like love. He led her to recording facilities, introduced her to Nashville's inner circle, and assured everyone she was talented. But whenever she tried to sing, his smile became icy. "There's already 1 star in this family," he'd say, softly resting his palm on her sheet music. "You don't need to compete with me." That's how it always started, with a compliment, followed by a lock. Jessi composed music in secret, late at night when the house was silent. But every time she brought him a new song, he'd give it a quick glance, nod politely, and tuck it into a drawer she never opened again. "Not bad," he'd reply, "but let us wait. The timing is not correct." The moment was never right. She was instructed on what to dress, how to pose, when to speak, and when to disappear. She was not a partner in their marriage. She was a polished extension of his image, designed to smile, support, and maintain silence. In interviews, she was not identified as an artist. She was Mrs. Duane Eddy. Even though she was there in the same studio where hit recordings were created, her voice remained behind the glass, unrecorded, uninvited, and unseen. "I felt like a mannequin that sang," she later admitted. "I had the clothes, smile, and title, but no freedom." She once asked him when she could make her own album. He laughed softly and continued, "Baby, your space is larger than that. You're the heart of our home." He meant that you don't have a voice. After 7 years of loving in silence, Jessi packed 1 bag, 1 instrument, and went without saying anything. No fight. There were no tears. As she closed the door behind her, she made a silent vow under her breath, "No man will ever dim my light again." However, as she would soon discover, quiet follows women in music like smoke follows fire. Jessi did not expect to fall in love again. Following Duane, love seemed more like a trap than a promise. But then came Waylon Jennings, a hurricane in cowboy boots with a grin that could break down walls and a voice that made women believe in outlaws. He did not ask for permission. He did not give lovely nothings. He simply looked at her and said, "I won't be your anchor, but I'll be your fire if you can handle the heat." She believed him, and for a while, the heat seemed liberating. Waylon was not like Duane. He did not silence her. He admired her skill and encouraged her to compose and sing. He claimed she was the only woman who did not flinch when he went dark. But the darkness was not lyrical. It was engulfing. Jessi had fled one prison only to be caught up in a maelstrom of desire, medications, and panic. Waylon made her feel alive one moment, then invisible the next. He'd disappear for days, high, drunk, or both. Then he'd stumble home, arms full of apologies, pockets full of grief. Jessi would hold him as he trembled from withdrawals, wiping sweat off his face and praying he'd make it through the night. She was more than just his wife. She was his nurse, shield, and witness. And somehow, his muse. She wrote tunes for him in motel rooms while he flirted with women outside. She canceled her own gigs to follow his tour bus across the country, fearing that if she left him alone, he'd crash, on stage or off. When he missed their son's birthday, she packed a bag and composed a letter that simply said, "I love you, but I can't keep doing this." She left it on the kitchen counter. The following morning he called her. There were no tears. There is no anger. Just one sentence. "If you go, I won't survive." So she stayed. She stayed when he forgot her name in the middle of high school. Stayed after he accused her of treason after she recorded a song without notifying him. He shattered her instrument that day, leaving splinters and strings all over the floor, much like her patience. Nonetheless, that night, she sang him to sleep, her voice shaking from the weight of her own erasure. "I thought I was his equal," she subsequently admitted. But loving Waylon meant becoming an echo of his chaos. People dubbed them the country's strangest love story. They didn't realize that behind the duets and headlines, Jessi was unraveling. Love did not heal her. It emptied her out, filling the gaps with someone else's suffering. When Waylon eventually got clean, Jessi was still present, still faithful, still strong. But something within her had altered. The girl who had previously sung about light had learned to sing through darkness. Waylon was her greatest love in life, but he was also the wound she carried in each subsequent note. By the time Jessi eventually stood on her own 2 feet in Nashville, she had learned how to move quietly in a man's world. She knew when to grin, when to recede, and how to speak with just enough truth to avoid being blacklisted. Despite her best efforts, she failed to anticipate Buck Owens' arrival. They met backstage during a radio show in 1971. He was charming, sharp-witted, and intrigued by Waylon's girl. But Jessi was more than that. She was writing again, discreetly scribbling rhymes on the backs of receipts and napkins between gigs. One of her most personal songs to date was a delicate, melancholy ballad about being adored for show and forgotten in quiet. It did not have a title, just agony veiled in song. Buck asked what she was working on, and she told him. He listened, closed his eyes, nodded, and remarked, "Damn, Jessi, that's got real legs." She took that as compliments. She didn't realize he had also taken the tune. 3 weeks later, she heard it on the radio. Different key, different title, but the same melody. Buck's voice crooned lyrics she had once grieved over. At first, she assumed it was a coincidence. Then she discovered her original lyrics in a ripped notebook. She compared the lines. The bones were hers. She addressed him at a studio party in a discreet manner, not wanting to raise a commotion. He grinned, poured himself another drink, and declared, "Look, love, this is Nashville. Inspiration is everywhere. take it as a compliment. That was all. No apologies, no credit, just a pat on the back and dismissal. Jessi did not cry. She did not shout. But after that night, she didn't write for nearly 3 years. What's the point, she thought to herself, if my words mean more in another man's mouth? The industry rallied around Buck. No one dared to question a legend about a woman's sentiments and a lost stanza. Jessi, exhausted of fighting, withdrew inside again. She performed. She smiled. She persevered. But she did not write. That theft involved more than just a tune. It took a chunk of her courage, and for a long time, it kept her silent. Because in country music, when a man takes your tale, it is referred to as brilliance. When a woman demands it back, they refer to it as drama. Jessi thought she was finally free when she secured a solo deal with Capitol Records. After years of being hushed by lovers, ignored by peers, and robbed by peers in disguise, this time was supposed to be different. She stepped into that room with polished songs in hand, a clear goal, and a voice seasoned with heartbreak and resilience. Jim Ed Norman sat across the desk, smiling and polished, giving her all she had battled for. "We don't want to change you," he informed her. "We want the real Jessi." Initially, she believed him. Then began the photo sessions. They transformed her raw, stubborn energy into something consumable. The cover art for her new album depicted her in a white outfit she never chose, bathed in light she never experienced. She resembled someone's concept of purity, not the lady who had endured medicines, fire, and grief. Then came the track listing. Her original songs, personal, jagged, and powerful, were labeled too niche, too dark, or not commercial, and they were replaced with safer tracks composed by Nashville regulars. By the time the record came out, only one of her songs remained. The rest was merely her voice. "You're the face," Jim remarked gently, "but the audience needs consistency." Jessi did not want to be consistent. She wanted to be honest. When she pushed back, requesting that her originals be reinstated, he leaned back in his chair and remarked, "Jessi, this is business. We're creating a brand, not just a diary." That word, brand, cut worse than any grief ever did. She hadn't fought her way through the smoke of Waylon's addiction, the agony of lost motherhood, or the guilt of stolen music merely to be a symbol. She was a voice, not a commodity. But the machine didn't care. One night, after a particularly lackluster performance, she stood in the dressing room, staring at a promotional poster on the mirror. Her face was airbrushed, her name was big, and the tagline said, "Jessi Colter, country's gentle soul." She laughed, a sour and broken laugh. She had lost all of her gentleness, not because she wasn't nice, but because she was tired of being misnamed. Jim Ed Norman never yelled or threatened. He did not need to. All he needed to do was grin and erase. And Jessi discovered that sometimes the most dangerous man isn't the one who attempts to break you, but the one who gracefully cuts you out of your own story. The deepest incisions are not usually made by men. Sometimes they come from those who should have stood by your side, the ones who knew your suffering, shared your stage, and wore the same sorrow embroidered into rhinestone gowns and stitched-on grins. Jessi Colter has always believed in sisterhood, especially in an industry where women had to struggle their way onto mic stands one bar at a time. So when she discovered a similar spirit, a fellow outlaw queen who had once worked as a backup vocalist much like her, Jessi saw more than a co-worker. She saw family. They were not best buddies. They did not discuss secrets or make late-night calls. But they had formed a relationship in the shadows of the Opry, where ladies smiled widely and bled softly. They performed on the same lineups, shared stories about stagehands who grabbed for too long, and exchanged knowing glances whenever a man in a suit claimed to understand their vision. So, when Jessi learned that her new CD had been withdrawn from a major televised Opry tribute just 48 hours before showtime, she was stunned, but not alarmed. "It's probably just a scheduling issue," she reminded herself. "Things shift last minute." But then a friend in production revealed the truth. Her sister in song had asked for the place for herself. There's no warning, there's no conversation, just a quiet replacement in the program with a bright new promo headshot in Jessi's place. She waited for a call, a text, a guilty look from backstage. Nothing arrived. No insults, no falsehoods, just a wall of quiet from a woman who nodded in agreement when Jessi mentioned being overlooked. A woman who knew what it was like to be passed over, but still did it. Jessi did not confront her. She did not cause a scene. She simply walked off the lot that night, whispering, "It wasn't the treachery that broke me. It was the silence." Later, she told a journalist, "She did not stab me. She just shut the door and kept walking." Legends have always had a place in country music. However, it frequently enabled just one woman to shine at a time. When you are both legends, one becomes the shadow. Jessi had learned how to withstand producers, husbands, and contracts, but learning that not even sisterhood was safe left the worst damage. Because betrayal by a man feels like warfare, but betrayal by a woman seems like erasure. Jessi Colter is now 81. Her hands continue to glide over piano keys as if they were born to do so, and her voice retains that worn, velvet aching. Yet there is something different about her these days. It is not the music that has changed. It is the silence. She's finished with it. She spent years playing the game. She smiled through interviews in which men were referred to as icons, while women were referred to as supportive. She stood beside Waylon while reporters inquired about his troubles while ignoring her own. She listened to execs compliment her vocals before burying her lyrics beneath someone else's identity. She was kind. She was a professional. She was obedient. And it nearly destroyed her spirit. "I'm not naming these names because I'm bitter," she tells me. "I'm naming them because I'm finally free." Her voice remains steady as she speaks. There is no rage, only clarity. Like a storm that has gone, leaving just clear air behind. These weren't ordinary men with authority. They were men who had access to her thoughts, tale, and voice. When they couldn't handle her, they repackaged her. When they couldn't truly love her, they used her artwork as an homage. When she eventually spoke up, they referred to her as tough, damaged, or simply too old. However, Jessi's age did not silence her. It honed her truth. She is not telling her story to damage reputations. She is telling it to rebuild her own. To reclaim every lyric, she whispered it into hotel pillows. Every song was buried so that another man may rise. Every dream she neatly wrapped and saved for a better time. If you've ever been told you're too much, not enough, or only important when you're quiet, Jessi Coulter is speaking up for you right now. She is proof that no matter how long they try to keep your story hidden, the truth will eventually come out, even if it takes 50 years, even if it means spending everything you have. "I didn't survive all of that to be remembered as someone's side note," she boasts. "I was never simply a wife. I was never simply a muse. I was always a voice." And now that voice refuses to stay silent. Which name surprised you the most? Which betrayal cut the deepest? Leave a comment below. Share this article and subscribe, because once a woman tells the truth, no one can cover it up again.